Good morning, church, and welcome to worship. We are so glad that we are able to offer in-person worship starting this morning. But we also want you to know that for the foreseeable future, we're also going to continue offering these online worship opportunities for people who don't feel comfortable coming to in-person worship at church just yet. Now, I will say that offering both services, either online or in person, requires a great deal of help. And so if you want to help volunteer, then there is a Sign Up Genius that's floating around, which is a website you can go to and sign up. It is through our website or also on social media, or you can contact our church office, because there is plenty of opportunities and teams for you to step in and help with. If learning the technology of online worship is something you would like to do, please contact me and let me know. If you would like to usher or do temperature checks for in-person worship, again, there is space available for you to step in and worship. It takes a lot of volunteers and the full cooperation of everyone involved in order to make these worship services safe and successful for everyone who's participating. We also want you to know that the coronavirus is still here. It hasn't gone away, and it looks like it'll be around for months to come. So with that being said, if you are someone who is struggling to make ends meet, or you know someone, perhaps a neighbor who is, and you need financial assistance or spiritual help, please contact the church office. We have resources available. If I can be a pastor in any way in this liminal space, please let me know. And then finally, I want to say thank you to the staff. It has been a long road to get us here to have in-person worship and to be able to offer the quality that we do online as well. Our staff is incredible. There are so many people who care so deeply about this church as an institution and also as a movement of God. And it takes those people to help make this happen. So I just want to say to the staff, to those who are committed lay leaders in the church who have been so diligent to help us get to this point, I want to say thank you. You are the hands and feet of Christ for this community. Now let us prepare our hearts as we go to God in worship.
Shall I want? I rest in the meadows of faithfulness and love. I walk by the Spirit waters of peace. Shepherd me, O Lord, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Gently you raise me into my weary soul. You lead me by pathways of righteousness and truth. My spirit shall sing the music of your name. Shepherd me, O Lord, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. I fear no evil, for you are at my side. Your rod and your staff, my comfort and my hope. Shepherd me, O Lord, beyond my fears of death into heaven beyond. You have set me a banquet of love in the face of hatred, crowning me with love beyond my power to hold. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears of death into surely your kindness and mercy follow me all the days of my life. I will dwell in the house of my God forevermore. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life.
Our gospel reading today comes from Matthew 14, verses 22 through 33. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and called him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got in the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
Storms. We have been having some big storms lately, haven't we? And sometimes storms, they can be scary. There can be a lot of lightning. We can hear a lot of thunder. There can be lots of wind. Storms can definitely be scary. And our Bible story today has a storm in it too. And in this story, the disciples, who were grown men, were also scared of a storm. They were in a boat out in the water in the dark during a storm. I would be scared too, wouldn't you? Well, Jesus was not with them in that boat, but he knew that they were scared. He knew that they needed him, and he also knew that this was the perfect opportunity again to teach them more about who he was and about having faith. And that's what he did. So during that storm that was scary to those disciples, Jesus walked to them, didn't swim to them, Didn't take another boat to them. He walked to them. Well, that was a little scary to them too. But by the end of it, Jesus had shown them once again that he was the Son of God. He reminded them, hey, look at all these things I've done. Have some faith in me. And he also let them know that they weren't going to be alone. It showed that he would walk right to them no matter what kind of storm they were in and help them get through it. And that's what it teaches us too, that when there's any kind of storm, and it doesn't have to be this kind, it can be anything that scares us or makes us nervous or worried, we're not alone. Jesus is with us. God is always there. Doesn't mean there won't be a storm. Doesn't mean we won't be scared. But we're not alone. So I think it means one more thing too. I think it tells us when we are scared, we need to stop and talk to God about it. Let him know what makes us afraid. And while we're talking to God, I think we feel that love around us and it helps us to calm down. And when we calm down, we use those amazing brains he gave us to help find solutions. Like if you were in a storm, what would you do? You'd get inside. You'd find shelter, right? Right now, a lot of people, including me, are worried about the coronavirus. So I talk to God about it, and it helps to calm me down, and it reminds me, okay, there are things I can do. I can wear a mask. I can wash my hands a lot. I can try to keep a little bit of distance between me and other people who aren't in my family. And it reminds me, okay, this might be a little scary sometimes, but I can do these things. And God reminds me that while I do them, I'm not alone. And you are never alone either. God is always with us, helping us to get through any storm.
You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep, my faith will stand. And I will call upon your name, and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surrounds me, you never failed and you won't start now. And I will call upon your name, and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine. Oh, you are mine. Oh, you are mine. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine.
I'm exhausted. Maybe that's not the right word. I'm weary. My body, my mind, my soul, I feel empty. I know we're all doing the best we can, but if you ask me, everyone's weary. Our bodies might not feel it, but our souls do. On Friday, Henry and I went to get our hair cut. It was the first time since March. Now, we were chatting it up with the lady who cuts our hair, and we start talking about the coronavirus and how this has affected her. What she said to me, I can't stop thinking about. She said, I went into Target last week for the first time since March. It's not the constant worry that gets me, although I do worry all the time about people standing too close, people not wearing masks. It's not even the dystopian reality that the Target shelves are bare and the loudspeaker is telling me to hurry up and to get what I came in for so I can get out and don't try anything on. Those things are terribly sad and off-putting too. But the thing that really gets me and depresses me is there's no joy in the building. You can feel the void of life. It's like it's been sucked out of the room. No one speaks. No one has energy. It's just a bunch of weary souls. Man, that last phrase got me. Weary souls. We're all feeling this. Everything's hard. Everything's taxing, confusing, confounding. We are bone tired and soul weary. And this is our collective liminal space. As you know now, liminality is the in-between space, the threshold crossing where we are transitioning into something, but we're not quite there yet. This is what our sermon series has been about since the beginning of June and what our lives have been about since the beginning of March. And today, we see it with the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. It's the story of Jesus walking on water, but it's also more than that. The disciples are exhausted and they are caught in liminal space, both literally and spiritually. They're literally in a boat, in between one shoreline and another. And water is all around them. There's a storm and the waves are crashing the boat. It's early in the morning, which means they've had to endure this storm all night. I mean, their physical liminal space is everywhere. And this is true for them spiritually too. They are bone tired and soul weary. Their friend and colleague, John the Baptist, has just been killed. Not enough attention has been placed on that for them. They tried to retreat yesterday and to grieve his death, but people came out of the woodwork, so they wanted to meet Jesus, hear Jesus, and also have him heal them. We saw this in last week's sermon when Jesus complied to the crowd's needs and the disciples spent all the little energy they had left helping organize thousands of people all day long. They tried to disperse the crowd at dinner, but Jesus did something incredible. He broke a small amount of bread and fish and fed everyone. Instead of grieving John the Baptist's death, retreating and resting for their own sake, they ended up feeding 5,000 people. So now they're really exhausted, bone tired, soul weary. And Jesus is too. At this moment, he retreats to the mountains to pray. Verse 22. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to a mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. This is a healthy reminder for all of us that when our souls are weak and weary, we need to retreat. Henry Nouwen calls this raising your drawbridge. You can't pour out if you have nothing left in the tank. You have to, at times, raise the drawbridge, cut yourself off. This kind of self-care, it is holy and needed. Perhaps the reasons we're feeling bone-tired and soul-weary is because we're running on empty, and we need solace in solitude in order to recharge, refocus, and regroup. Perhaps the most spiritual lesson in our text today is that we must build in moments for self-care. Otherwise, we'll remain bone-tired and soul-weary. So back to the story. Verse 24. By this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. This is the second thing we must see. Jesus comes to them in their exhaustion. He goes towards their liminal space. He enters into their storm and calms it. He participates in it. This is a huge lesson Christians need to understand. You don't have to live flawlessly and joyously, pretending to be perfect or pleasant all the time in order to experience the presence of God. Not at all, actually. Jesus doesn't wait until you have it all figured out. Jesus comes as the ultimate comforter, the shepherd, and he comes in the midst of our pain, in our chaos. So if you're bone-tired and soul-weary, then look up, because Christ is standing in front of you. Verse 26. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Now, of course they think he's a ghost. They have no idea he can walk on water. But for us reading this text, we need to understand that Jesus is the God of the universe made flesh. And time and boundaries and distances can't stop the maker of the universe, the curator of our souls, from getting to us in times of need. No matter how far you've strayed or how broken you feel or how tired you are, Christ comes to you and says, "Do not be afraid." Which means he doesn't come with hostility. He doesn't come judging us for our sins or mistakes or even our weariness. We're not being judged. We're being loved. We're met with compassion and comfort. We're told, "Do not be afraid." This matters for us who are trapped in liminal spaces. Christ is ahead of us in our future, stepping back towards us, telling us we can move forward in faith, which will be towards him. And we can do this without being afraid. And speaking of stepping forward, look what happens to Peter next. Verse 28. Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and beginning to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why do you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Now we need to make this connection today. Jesus is ahead of us and calls us out onto the waves, meaning we have to leave the liminal space of the boat, the safety net that we've crafted for ourselves. We have to leave it behind, stepping into the unknown. Now, I know this is scary, but think of what it means spiritually. We can leave behind the in-between, the space that is really no place. And we do it by taking the hand of Christ and having faith that we are met with love. Maybe you need to hear this today. No matter how terrible you feel or how bad COVID-19 has been for you and your family, Christ's promise is that we can step forward out of it because He meets us in it and pulls us into a better tomorrow. This is true for Peter, except when he gets distracted. Look at verse 30. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." This happens to us too. We get distracted. Liminality pulls us back, and we lose sight of where Christ is. Some of us get too scared and long to be back in the boat. But if we keep going, what happens to Peter in verse 31 will happen to us. Jesus immediately reached out His hand and caught him. So what is our liminal lesson for today? We need to own our discomfort and pain. We need to do a body and soul check and see how weary we've become. And we need to build in self-care because when we do, Christ comes to us out of love, calls us forward away from the in-between spaces. And when we get distracted and we start to fall away, He reaches out His hand and pulls us up. I don't know about you, but I need to hear this today. My bone-tired and soul-weary self needs to be reminded that Christ is in this with us, calling me forward, pulling me up, telling me not to be afraid. And He's doing the same for you. And that presence isn't a ghost. It's God loving us, joining us, calling us forward. All we have to do is step out of the boat.